Boy, oh boy, the race for Champions League football is really starting to heat up right now. The race in the Premier League is getting tight, and we had another really big game last night between Manchester City and Aston Villa. But before we get into that, we need to address the elephant in the room. You may have noticed I'm not Terry, and you'd be completely right with that assessment. I am, in fact, AJ. A link to my socials will be in the comments. I've been brought onto the channel to try and bring a slightly different view on some of the biggest games in the Premier League. And we're going to continue with this one here. Manchester City versus Aston Villa. A crucial game, really, for both teams in their attempt to break into the top 5. And what we're going to do today is start off with Aston Villa trying to play the ball out from the back. And the reason we're going to start here is because, for me, Manchester City were much improved in this position compared to what we've seen pretty much throughout the season. They've been quite poor defensively this year. This was a return to some of their better pressing actions. So it starts, of course, when Aston Villa are trying to play the ball out from the back. What City were often doing was pushing 4 players further forward to try and apply pressure. But these 4 were relatively narrow with their positioning. Sometimes we will see players start really wide, for example, out on the 2 fullbacks, but City didn't want to do that. Instead, this 4 would come really narrow. Now, the reason they're doing this is to block the centre of the pitch, of course, the most dangerous part of the football pitch. So if you can stop Villa playing into those areas, that's going to be a good thing. You can stop the likes of Tielemans, for example, from getting on the ball and dominating. The problem, however, is they are leaving room out wide. You can see Cash on the right-hand side, Digne on the left-hand side. They do have a little bit of room that they can operate in. Or so you would think, if City were being passive. But they were not. Because as the ball would come to this side, let's say they play to the left towards Pau Torres, City are going to come up, McAtee is going to come forward to press Torres here, Gundogan's going to connect with the midfielder. You might think this fullback is free for a sort of bounce pass around the corner like this, but City were connecting their fullbacks. Now what this means is that someone like Matheus Nunes, rather than sitting in his back line, in his back 4, he would actually then be kind of given the freedom to connect to the press, to come higher and apply pressure to the ball. We could also see something similar on the other side as well. So let's move the ball to Ezri Konsa. Marmoush is going to come in to apply pressure, Gundogan will pick up one of the midfielders, and O'Reilly now, from the other side, will come forward to apply pressure to Matty Cash. And we've got a couple of really nice examples of this. And it was happening sort of from minute 1, really, all the way through to minute 90. So you can see initially 4 pressing players for Manchester City, and they're all relatively narrow. This means that the space is going to be out wide, as you can see there, with the 2 fullbacks. However, because City get their spacings right, their timings right, they're able to prevent this. This is what Villa want to do. They want to move the ball up into midfield and then pop it wide to the fullback. But the positioning of the Manchester City fullback, Matheus Nunes, doesn't let that happen. You can see him really high here, applying pressure, and Villa simply can't play out from the back. Another example of this over here now. Once again, the pressing City players really narrow initially, really compact in the middle of the pitch, and that means the space is going to be out there in that wide zone. So Marmoush from the left-hand side is going to come in, and you can also see O'Reilly from left back connecting to the press and eventually picking the ball up in this position. This was also shown in the second half as well, something that happened throughout the match. Luca Digne picking up the ball deep in his left back position, Matheus Nunes coming all the way forward from right back to apply pressure to turn the ball over in these areas, creating these small sort of 3v3 situations where basically City were too good and Villa couldn't play out from the back, and that sort of reflected in the possession numbers. You can see City were dominant on the ball, and the reason for that was because Villa couldn't play out from the back. So far what we've learned is that Aston Villa were trying to play the ball out from the back. They were trying to play in the right way, if you like, the modern way, moving the ball through the pitch. But quite simply, Manchester City were too good with their pressure. So if you try and play out from the back and the opposition press really well, you're going to struggle on the ball, and like we've seen already, Manchester City did have more possession. The question now is, what did City look to do with the possession, and also how did Aston Villa try to defend? Because this is what we saw for most of the match. City dominating the ball, trying to find a way through, and it very much was a case of that, trying to find a way through. Because in deeper positions, City had a lot of time. You know, the likes of Gvardiol, Diaz, Kovacic, Bernardo Silva, they could often all drop in to form a sort of box 4 shape at the base of the structure here. And, you know, Rashford and Tielemans are nearby, but Unai Emery is instructing them not to be too aggressive with the pressure because they would rather cover the space in behind them. So City find it very easy to move the ball out from the back. The question is going to be about how they now rotate on the ball, the structures they use, how they try and overload key parts of the pitch, and how these players are rotating, interchanging, and linking up with each other to move the ball forward. And it started initially with City using some pretty wide fullbacks. We don't tend to see quite as much of this in the Premier League at this moment in time. We tend to see more inverted fullbacks and things like that. But we did see two very, very wide City fullbacks, like we can see here. Both of them really stretching the pitch here. And I think what City are trying to do is almost use, let's just quickly link them up here, Nunes, Diaz, Gvardiol and O'Reilly to almost be the anchor point, if you like, the foundation of this Manchester City team, to then let this lot kind of roam about a little bit more and interchange. You can see the likes of Gundogan, Kovacic, Bernardo Silva, De Bruyne. They're all in positions where they don't necessarily want to stay all game. De Bruyne will want to drift inside. Sometimes Gundogan will want to go higher. Bernardo Silva will want to drift deeper and then sometimes move higher. And it was kind of these four round the back that allowed them to do that. So this was sort of City's base shape, if you like. Of course, the two wide fullbacks are going to allow the likes of Marmoush and McAtee to come inside the pitch. City are trying to combine and connect. But for large parts of the game, they found it quite difficult to actually move through Aston Villa. In terms of creating clear-cut chances against this Villa side, it's extremely difficult to do. The reason for that is because Villa are compact in their 4-4-2. You know, you've got two centre-backs, two full-backs either side of them, and they're close to each other, they're compact. But also the likes of Rodgers and Ramsey, supposedly wingers, but in terms of defensively, they're going to put in the hard yards. They're all going to get behind the ball and make life incredibly difficult for you. When the ball is shifted over to one side, for example, moved across to the right, all these Villa players are going to come over and sort of suffocate the player to one side of the pitch. But City actually used this to their advantage, and this was quite intelligent. Because what City would do was start bringing loads of players over to one side. So let's use the right-hand side as the example. So you've got Diaz over here, Bernardo Silva over here, Kovacic might roam over as well, De Bruyne, who is supposedly a striker, is going to come towards this side as well. And when you bring loads of City players over here like this, Villa have to react and also bring loads of players over to this side. What this means, though, is that there is going to be a space on the far side of the pitch. Now, that can be for the fullback to attack, like O'Reilly. We've already seen him holding the width for the team. Or also, in moments, Marmoush can pull just a little bit wider into this wide zone out here. And what it does is, if you overload this side, it means this side is underloaded. There's not as many players. So if you can now get a switch out to this position, rather than now being in like a 4 versus 4, for example, or even a 3 versus 3, you're now 1v1 up against a fullback. And Marmoush is a player who may not be a traditional winger as such, but he is quite a direct player. He is happy to pick the ball up and attack defenders. He's very positive and actually almost very aggressive with his actions, always looking to take on the defenders. And we can see this with the first goal. City having lots of players drifting over towards the right-hand side of the pitch. You can see the centre-back here. You can see Bernardo Silva. You've got Kovacic. This is, I can't quite see who that is. Is that Gundogan? You've got loads of players basically over this side of the pitch for City. And it means that there is going to be space on the far side. So if you can play that switch, you are going to be 1 versus 1 in that position. And like we said already, Marmoush is the sort of player who may not be a true 1 versus 1 winger, but he is direct, he is aggressive, he attacks the byline, he cuts the ball across the box. And look at the number of players that City have in the box here. Of course, also Villa defending really deep in this moment. But look just how many Manchester City players are in the box waiting for that cutback. And it's Bernardo Silva that puts it into the net. But it comes from clever play for Manchester City. Clever play. And I think the way that they manipulated these wide areas was pretty good all game long. Because, again, like I've said, it's difficult to play through Villa, so sometimes you have got to go around them. The other sort of pattern that I liked was when sometimes the fullbacks would pull a little bit deeper, trying to encourage Villa out of their block. You know, let's say Gvardiol has the ball here, the fullbacks are high and wide. It's easy for Villa to sit in their shape and almost know where the City players are. Whereas, if O'Reilly just drifts a few yards deeper to try and get on the ball, it does encourage Rodgers to come out towards him. And again, if you can encourage Rodgers out of position, it means you can find your winger. And again, if you can go 1v1, then you're going to have a big chance. And Pep Guardiola recognised this. He recognised this and he made a substitute. He brought Doku onto the pitch into this position. Now, let me just move Marmoush for a second because the personnel now don't matter apart from Doku. Because the issue was Villa took off Matty Cash and brought Disasi into the pitch. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to Disasi. He's a good footballer, of course. But I'll tell you now, he is not a right back. He never will be a right back. He should do his defending in the middle of the pitch here. He should never be pulled into a wide zone. To literally put him at fullback is a crazy decision from Unai Emery. It sort of cost Aston Villa in the Champions League against PSG the other week. And it cost them again in this game here. Because City have still got reasonably easy access to their wingers because Villa are defending centrally. And Doku against Disasi is just a complete mismatch. We are talking about one of the best dribblers in the world right now against a centre-back who should be glued to the middle of the pitch. It was only ever really going to go one way, and the way it went looks something like this as we just move along on to the next clip. There's Pep Guardiola getting a little bit angry, but he's going to be happy in a moment. And the reason he's going to be happy is because once again City have easy access to the wide position on the left-hand side. This is a mismatch. Disasi just does not want to be here. Villa and Emery perhaps could have put Konsa out here. If they wanted to make this sub, Disasi could have gone into centre-back. Konsa could have come and played on the right-hand side. He's played right-back quite a lot in his career. They could have done this, but they didn't. And instead, Doku was 1 versus 1. And I'll tell you for free, I wouldn't want to be 1 versus 1 against Doku. Is he a little bit raw with his final product in terms of crossing, delivery, shots, etc.? Yes. But dribbling, he is unstoppable. He is a very, very powerful, quick, skillful, tricky, agile young man who can just destroy fullbacks, let alone centre-backs. And Disasi gets absolutely toasted. I mean, see you later, Disasi, mate. He's been sold a dream. And then Doku, outside of the right boot, puts that cross into the box. And who was it arriving at the far post? The fullbacks. The fullbacks. We said about this earlier. Fullbacks holding the width for the team, getting into these attacking positions. Pep Guardiola really threw his fullbacks forward in this game. And ultimately, it was that got him this winner. So for me, this was deserved for Manchester City. I think they were the better team generally throughout the match anyway. I think Guardiola had his team set up to control the game, to suffocate Aston Villa, and he and his team achieved that really for large parts of the game. But it was still tight because Villa always have that transitioning threat with someone like Marcus Rashford and they get the penalty and score. But I think when it came down to the substitutes, I think Emery just got it wrong and Guardiola got it really, really right. And that's the fine margins in elite level football. At the highest level, you've got to get your subs right because they may just win you a football match or lose you a football match. They may get you Champions League football for next season, or they may see it just slip away a little bit. It was a tough result for Aston Villa, maybe a little bit harsh. A draw may have been a fairer result, but if I had to pick a winner, it would have been City. For me, they were the team asking the questions, taking control of the ball, dominating, and eventually getting that sub right. So yeah, I think City deserve this. It's a huge step for them in the right direction in their hunt for Champions League football. For Villa, it's a real blow. They're going to have to make sure they react well to that. They recover. I mean, they did after going out of the Champions League, so you would assume they'll be okay. But it's a tough one to take. They'll need to make sure that they bounce back. But in terms of this particular video today, that's all there is really to talk about. City, just about the better team, just about got the win that they deserved, although it did come late. 3 points for them, and on to the next one. So, yeah, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like, subscribe, get notifications on, and also leave a comment in the comment section down below. But apart from that, we will see you in the next one.